Professionals discussion series live. Good evening, and on the eve of a special 40th anniversary for the city, when a certain Aberdeen football club won the European Cup Winners' Cup, I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's AYP Discussion Series event. Tonight's event is on the back of an event that we hosted with the then Energy Minister, Fergus Ewing, and a panel from academia and recruitment managers from operators and service companies back in 2014. Our audience was full of AYP members, keen to find out how they could start their career in the oil and gas sector. Move forward almost 10 years, and this has changed. We only have an hour tonight, and this is a big topic, so we'll try and get through as much as we can. So, according to a new poll unveiled on Tuesday by advisory firm True North, the Scottish public backs the positive impact of the North Sea energy sector. The research undertaken by Survation shows that some 61% of the population think that energy companies operating in UK waters provide a boost to the UK economy. Given the current cost of living crisis and high energy costs, the survey showed that a huge majority of people, 75%, believe that the UK should meet its demands for oil and gas from domestic production rather than importing energy from overseas. Therefore, this challenges the presumption against new oil and gas exploration contained in the government's draft plan. But how are we going to attract young professionals into the sector? Well, that's what tonight's all about. And I want to welcome you to our panel tonight. And tonight we've got Paul Binney from Woods. I'll just change that screen there now. We've also got Dan McAteer from Worley. We have Andy Wright from Repsol. We have Chris Taylor, I'll just bring him on just now, from Harbour. And we have Ellie Severi here from Spirit Energy. And we also have, last but not least, Alec Perry from Serica. There we go. Good night, everyone. Good night. Good evening, everyone. how are we all doing?
Good.
Thanks.
Good, thanks.
So,
I thought we were just wrapping up before we even started there, Ross.
I know. Sorry about that. There we go. Well, I think the main question of tonight is there a career in oil and gas? Now, I just want to ask you all individually, and I'll just start off with Paul. What do you think there's still a career in oil and gas?
I absolutely do. I mean, I'm sort of, although I look like Santa Claus, I actually haven't been in the industry that long, and I've only been in since 2015, and I'm sort of now working in wood, and I just see the growth that we've got, and our order books are growing. So there's absolutely a future in oil and gas. And let's face it, the technical skill set we've got in oil and gas, complex industry, heavily regulated, is so transferable if people want to move on. But for me, there's still a long future here.
Great. And what about yourself, Chris? What's your view on this question?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think there is. I'm a little bit longer in the industry. I've been in for around about 13 years, and it's kind of my first career outside of out from university. But I have a few stats from an OA UK presentation that I saw recently, and today 76% of the UK energy comes from oil and gas. So there's no question that we need it, and we will need it for a good few years. And it makes up a massive part of our energy transition into getting onto renewables. And it will need to be part and parcel of how we grow the country and keep the lights on really for years to come. So I think, we mentioned it's a pretty exciting industry to be in. There's obviously big budgets, there's lots of big projects, kind of heavy industry, but there's a lot of things that are outside of just the engineering side of it as well. There's lots of really interesting support functions. There's some very interesting commercial agreements. Obviously, there's a massive transferable skill set that goes across to other countries, with the North Sea very much being the kind of leader, or seem to be the leader in how we do things. So I think all of those things make it a very attractive place to be, even though there is obviously a a fairly big change in what's the kind of industry looks like and has done for the last few years.
Yeah, great. And how about yourself, Dan? What's your view on this?
Yeah, I've been in the industry a bit longer, than Paul and Chris. I'm probably getting close to 20 years in oil and gas, both North Sea and international. I think there's definitely a career there. What I would say is I think the careers are changing. I think as we move into the late life basin that is the North Sea. The North Sea was a pioneering basin going back 40, 50 years ago. I think there's definitely there's a career we're moving towards. Late life. There is additional projects coming in. There's not the projects that we used to see. I remember working in Aberdeen in the early 2000s, and you couldn't move in Union Street for the amount of different people that were coming in because the amount of work we're doing with big massive hookups, these sort of things. But moving more into a world as to how do you sweat the assets that that we currently have, and how do we do that in a more economical way? If you go into the world of digitization, and how do you reduce personnel offshore from a point of view that you run more of the assets from the actual beach, from the office, makes it more safer. That also then takes in the younger generations, because then it's they're the generations that are used to working in that more digital world. So yeah, for me, there's definitely still a career within the oil and gas sector.
Great. How about yourself, Alec? What's your view on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in the industry since 1998, I guess, if you include my summer jobs with the oil service companies. And I mean, I think if we just look at even last week, I'm reliably informed that global oil consumption hit an all-time high at 103 million barrels a day. So clearly, there's still a oil and gas demand. Some of the other panelists have already touched on transferable skills, and I guess the oil and gas industry, it's a big industry here in Aberdeen and in the northeast of Scotland, but globally, when we talk about transferable skills, at the moment, it's usually in the context of can we transfer skills from oil and gas into renewables and alternative energies. But in terms of oil and gas itself, the transferable skills, it's been proven that they're transferable globally. You go anywhere on the globe and walk down the street in any city, you'll probably bump into somebody from Aberdeen. So, I think, the other panelists have touched on a lot of good points, is going to continue to innovate, as we've seen, from when oil and gas was first discovered, land rigs, to then offshore, to then deep water. We're continuing to push the boundaries, drill deeper wells, drill higher pressures, and the whole investment landscape is going to change, in that we're going to have to deliver these oil and gas projects in a more sustainable way with a reduced carbon footprint. So it's definitely going to, I think, look a bit different to what it has in the last 20 years.
Yeah, thanks, Alec. I mean, same question yourself, Ellie. What's your view on this?
Yeah, so for me, there is absolutely a career in oil and gas, and I've been in the industry for 17 years, and I have been greatly enjoying it kind of all the way through. But I think what we need to acknowledge is that, as kind of Dan was already mentioning, the industry is changing, and I think people that are looking to join the industry today, they will not really be kind of joining oil and gas industry. They will be joining integrated energy industry, and this is because most oil and gas companies are not kind of standing still, and they're themselves in the process of transitioning to lower carbon integrated energy companies. And they do that by expanding into like renewables industries, or by getting involved in emission reduction or energy efficiency improvements. And it's not just the likes of like majors like BPs and Shells and Equinors. Small operators are doing that too. So like the company I work for example, Spirit Energy, we produce gas, but we are also looking to repurpose one of our reservoirs into massive CO2 storage facility. So I think, 100%, there are a lot of super rewarding careers in the industry, but we just need to get, in my mind, out of the kind of mindset of thinking of the industry as an oil and gas industry. I think we should be thinking about it as an integrated energy industry. There's a lot more opportunities on offer.
Great, thank you. And Andy, what's your view?
So I agree. I think there is a career in the industry. I think, as a graduate, I think one of the things we have as an industry is an extremely high level of professionalism in a lot of different fields. So whether that's engineering, whether it's supply chain, whether it's commercial, whether it's IT, whether it's your HSE. So as a young graduate, if you want to be exposed to that, our industry is exceptional for this. I think, as it's been said, we have challenges going forward, and today's challenges and the future challenges are going to be different to the challenges we've had in the past. And that requires diversity. It requires diversity of thought. So maybe the types of people coming into the industry may change as well, which is a positive. The other thing I think to think about as well, and we're in a travel, it's a truly global society now, is that whilst I believe there is a career left in UKCS, because of the standards we have here, it acts as a fantastic springboard for a career elsewhere in the world in the oil and gas industry. So if you came here, kind of cut your teeth in the UKCS, you'd be very, very highly regarded in the rest of the world, and you certainly see your careers out in other parts of the world, if not in the UKCS. So it's I think oil and gas industry absolutely is a career, and there's absolutely a career and opportunities within the UK too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because I mean, it's. I've been pre-warning the guys before we came on tonight that I'm going to be picking on them because we've got quite a lot of questions to get through, and probably a lot of good comments and valued points as well to get across. So I think the next question I was wanting to bring up that was emailed through here was, what are some of the most in-demand jobs in the oil and gas industry for young professionals? Now, I think I'll pick on yourself with this one, Dan, having you just recently change roles yourself as well. I mean, what do you find are some of the most in-demand roles now within the industry that would be, that we're needing young people to get excited about and get involved with?
I think it's across all disciplines, Ross, to be honest. From your traditional engineering disciplines, I think what we're probably seeing now as we move into the new area of what is this, we talk about the integrated energy sector, electrical engineers. I think if I take the last 20 years, the world of electrical has been trace heating and temporary lighting, whereas now as we look towards electrification of assets and how you look to use less of your gas turbines offshore and all these sort of things, that I think definitely that's one particular area for sure. And project management, I think looking for the next sort of wave of project managers is quite funny. I always use the analogy. None of us as young professionals go to university and study project management. Many of us go back to university and do an MSc in project management. Once you've been a project manager for several years and made a mess of it, we then get the education as to how we should be doing it. And I think that's one thing that we see a lot, like your project engineers, you're getting that sort of capability into the industry, because I say the projects that we're going to be doing going forward are very different. They're not the big hookups that we've done, over the last 20 years. It's these more intricate, whether it be subsea tiebacks or modifications. But as I said before, as you get more into that world of digital and how you bring that into assets, I'll be honest, I struggle to how you do that sort of stuff, because I'm a sort of mechanical background, and I don't really get the whole digital world. But you get the younger generations, it just works for you. Yeah. You live in it. Well, this is a prime prime example of it.
Okay, yeah. So, like Alec as well, what on the kind of drilling and well side? I mean, what's the more kind of in-demand jobs that you're finding that you're maybe struggling with?
I think offshore supervision is a bit of a bottleneck in terms of experienced offshore supervisors that kind of, back to Dan's point, are like effectively project managing the day-to-day ops on a drilling rig. Mm-hmm. And so what that leads to is, maybe someone who would be like the night shift supervisor has maybe been promoted, maybe ahead of where they may have been 20 years ago. So then that leaves shortages of night supervision. But I think, to Dan's point, right across, we're seeing shortages of people. We're seeing shortages of contract specialists, procurement people, materials and logistics. I mean, logistics was a tough, a tough area to recruit for last year in and around Aberdeen, particularly because globally things were picking up. And again, I think you see a lot of HR jobs. Oil and gas is not just about, the kind of stereotypical thing you see in STV news of an old video with, a couple of guys throwing a rig tong about in a drill floor. You've got a huge amount of support services associated in oil and gas. So, yeah, I think HR, commercial, contracts, just you name it, right across the board. And I think, to Dan's point as well, project management, because there's probably less projects being done in the North Sea than there was 20, 30 years ago, we're not getting as many people through the machine and getting dirt under the fingernails, so to speak, to then allow them to become, the project managers of the future. So it's tough. Mm-hmm. But that opens opportunities for recruitment, which is why we're here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll probably ask this next question to probably, don't take any offence with this, guys, but it's probably our younger members of the panel, our probably class, our younger professionals. So, no, sorry, Paul. Chris and Ellie, I'll probably put this one to yourself here that came through. How has the oil and gas industry evolved in recent years, and what implications does this have for young professionals seeking careers in the sector? If I could start maybe with yourself on this one, Ellie. What's your view on this one?
So I think there have been some kind of like very significant changes, and we spoke about them a little bit already. So the main one for me stems from this huge focus on sustainability and then pressure on the industry to almost like reinvent itself. And the implications are that like people come into the industry, or younger people working in the industry, or anybody really working in the industry, have greater opportunities to make meaningful impact, and specifically in kind of helping the industry and the society to transition to more sustainable energy mix. And all of us will have more diverse opportunities in new energy sectors. And that, again, we've talked about this already a little bit as well. And I think Dan was mentioning kind of automation, digitalization. Those are the trends, and they're not specific to oil and gas, of course, but these trends have been kind of game changers in terms of if you think about robotics or digital twins technologies or data analytics, but they can also be quite disruptive for some jobs more than others. And in that respect, I think the implication is that we all need to be kind of more adaptive and forward thinking. Same. Okay.
Great, thank you. And Chris, what would be your viewpoint on this one?
So I think it's changed a fair bit. I mean, certainly when I joined, there was a good piece of an international travel, and that was quite a big draw as a young person. You got a chance to go and do graduate schemes where you could fly abroad and spend time in different countries, different cultures. I think there's slightly less of that, although that seems to be coming back a little bit. And as we've mentioned before, if you've got a good, strong basis of operating oil and gas in the North Sea, then that sets you up really nicely for that kind of thing. But I think probably the bigger change is the sort of gentle creeping change of digitalization. So, up until fairly recently, my company was still using paper-based permits on some of their assets, and now it's much more integrated in much better systems that work as you'd expect them to. I think the industry is a little bit of a slow follower on that, but then certainly that's something that I could see being a massive benefit to us and in better ways of working, and just being a bit more kind of savvy with the tech and a bit more kind of approachable with that and willing to take that on. But I think probably the biggest change is the environmental piece of it. So there was always a bit of a view that environmental wasn't quite as important, or considered important certainly, but not the forefront of our thinking. And you can see that in the likes of safety critical elements were always that, but now they're safety and environmental critical elements. We're taking much more kind of a stronger view on that. We have environmental reps as well as safety reps offshore now. I think it's just built a lot more into the way we do things. And some of that's driven by legislation, but some of that is just realizing that, we need to be good custodians of the environment we've got, and that we've got a good chance to make things better there. And decarbonisation is going to be a big part of that. We've already sort of touched on electrification and making sure that we're not running massive gas turbines to run huge pumps that we don't need anymore. So that's a really interesting piece of it as well. There's a lot of good work to be done in that space, just to sort of clean up our act, and a lot of that will help with the image problem that the industry has, which will help to attract young professionals. I think.
That's certainly one of the questions we've got from quite a few people about the PR side of the industry, which we'll come on to. We'll go to some of the live questions we've got here as well. Got a question here from Diane Morris. Diane, how are you doing? Have you found a lot of people have left the oil and gas industry post-pandemic? And if so, what are operators and service providers doing to fill the gap and develop and retain potential talent? So I'll put that one to yourself, Andy. What's your kind of view on this one?
So I think following the pandemic, there was a sort of shift of people. I wouldn't say it was a rush, but some people did leave the industry. And I think where we are in Aberdeen, when you choose to leave the industry, that's often followed by choosing to leave the area as well. And that's the type of decision that you only really make once in your life. You don't often choose to come back again, particularly if you have family and things. I think operators and service providers have realised that, and I think there is a big shift in investment within their own companies and developing their own people, making it clear to their own employees that there is a future and they're valued, really. So none of it's rocket science, but just simple things, just to remind people that we are valued by our employers. And I think we are lucky in this industry that from that point of view, it's not quite as cutthroat perhaps as finance industries down in London and those sorts of things. I think those are the key things. I mean, even events like this as well, we as an industry, I think we have an understanding and appreciation that young people may be looking elsewhere, and just to remind them that this is not an industry that's about to fold. It's an industry that's got a lot of life left. It's got a lot of value to give, both experience and in terms of the compensation you receive for working within the industry as well. And it's diverse as well. It's in terms of the skill sets required. It's not just your engineers. It's commercial. It's people with a finance background or aspirations around finance. So I think hopefully that provides an answer.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andy. Paul, what are you doing in your own team, for example, to kind of fill this gap and retain potential talent?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's sort of necessarily just the pandemic. I've sort of been with Wood 2 years, so I was sort of post-pandemic, and I don't think it was so much the pandemic hitting our figures as where we are now, where there's sort of just fluctuations, there's opportunities elsewhere, especially in sort of attracting that young talent. As we said before, it doesn't have the best reputation, and sort of speaking to our graduates sort of that are in, it seems a lot of the people just sort of are going elsewhere, and sort of going back to a point made earlier is the fact that this isn't oil and gas, we're energy, especially wood, and sort of Dan certainly is saying in Worley, in fact, it's the energy industry. In terms of what we're doing for our people, we've only got 3 pillars to our strategy, and the central pillar is inspired culture. So we need to keep, it's far easier, it's far cheaper, it's far more business efficient to keep the talent you have. So we've sort of set up the Wood Academy, and that's sort of to develop and invest in the people, give them sort of a whole host of sort of from online training all the way through to in person, and sort of just investing in that. And that covers project management, it covers engineering skills. We've got regular webinars and lunch and learns looking at vibration, hydrogen, carbon storage, all going on within the industry, within the business, and everybody's encouraged. And sort of on top of that, we've got a whole network of networks. So we've got the early careers network, which is all the graduates and trainees and designers. It's for the early careers team, and it's run by the early careers team. I'm the sort of the exec sponsor for it, and sort of we get together every month and every quarter we have an offsite, and it's just really, okay, what do you want, what do you need, let's see what we can do about that. The graduate career program that we've got rotates people around the business. They're not tied to a single contract anymore. We're getting them out and getting them across to see other things, and we've got a shadow lead. There's a whole load of stuff that we're doing, and then we realize that we've got to retain, because if you retain, it attracts. As soon as you sort of have a burst of personnel, it's difficult to attract people in, especially going back to Randy's point. Aberdeen's a small place. The village is in. When I was first moved to Aberdeen, I was told, be careful. It's a medium-sized city that's actually a small village. And so the word gets out. If you start losing people, if you get a bad reputation, it's hard to get them in, hard to get the quality. So that's retaining. When we're looking outside, we are sort of very heavily into our steam. We've sort of got visits into local schools probably every other week at the minute. Graduate fairs. We sponsor a lot of postgraduate work in the university, in both RGU and Aberdeen. Sort of my line manager, Jeff McDonald, he's sort of an in-post lecturer down at Robert Gordon's on energy. I sort of do some bits on the MBA down there and leadership. So we're just constantly looking to get out there and attract. And it's not just young graduates. We're looking further afield. We've got sort of an active veterans engagement network as well, trying to tap that talent to come through. So people are core to what we do. We've got as I said earlier, we've got a booming industry in woods, because we cut across energy, minerals, and chemicals. So it's easy to keep. So we want to retain, we want to develop, we want to grow, and at the same time use that critical mass to attract more people in.
Yeah, because that just follows on nicely to the next question that I was going to kind of bring up to discuss with you both. And that's about this perception element as well, because I think that the industry's always got this perception of hire and fire, and bring people in and just let them go. And this question that came through the email was, with oil market volatility, the boom and bust, do we foresee the pandemic having a long-term effect on our ability to hire young professionals? Dan, what would be your kind of viewpoint on that as well?
Yeah, I think history tells itself that the oil market has been boom and bust. Some of us who are probably longer in the tooth and in the industry remember the 2008 and then 2014 crashes that we went through. But I think where we are now, it's no longer an oil and gas market. It's very much an energy market. And I think as you look at oil and gas will taper out. There's no denying that. As we head towards 2050 and we move towards net zero, our dependency in what we do with oil and gas will start to decline. We'll always need it. We'll always need it in some sort of form. And I think what you're then starting to see there is that you're then starting to see that other energy markets pick up, whether it be renewables on fixed or floating wind, onshore wind, hydrogen, whether it's blue, green, CCUS, battery manufacturing, these sort of things are then starting to, you look at Chris mentioned the OE UK report. You look at all those energy investments and energy demands going forwards, those graphs only go one way, and it's up. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you're really starting to see. Even, the way that we talk about oil and gas companies now, they're not oil and gas companies, they're all energy companies. And I think you can see that changing too. And that's having the likes of the companies that myself and Paul work for from the service sector. We're changing too. Aberdeen is no longer a service sector hub that supports just oil and gas. We've got probably some of the best offshore wind farms sitting literally on our doorstep. we've got carbon capture utilization and storage hopefully going to come in when Acorn gets its track 2 funding. We've got green hydrogen in Kintor. These sort of things, and I think that's the bits that we can't afford to actually forget, that that's the future that you're stepping into. And I think stepping into a job within oil and gas, you're not stepping into oil and gas, you're stepping into the energy market. And it's been and what we very much try and do is, how do you use the oil and gas sector as a means to kind of train and develop young professionals to then move them into the actual what is the energy market, and it could be, say, hydrogen, CCUS, or renewables.
Andy, are you finding it in maybe, like, say, your own team or at Repsol generally, are you finding it difficult to attract young professionals to the company, or within, are you having any issues with that, or are you finding it any different than it was before pandemic?
I think the company's reinstated its graduate scheme now, so I think that was well subscribed. There was I was involved in some of that process, and there was certainly a lot of enthusiastic young people who were who involved. I think it is because of where Aberdeen is. I'm obviously not Scottish. I'm from the northwest of England. I kind of tapped into the oil and gas industry because I went to university at Heriot-Watt in Scotland. None of my school friends are in the oil and gas industry, and I don't think it crossed their minds. So, we are a little bit out on a limb up here, and we're probably not as well known as across the whole of Britain, which I suppose doesn't help in attracting people, but it does help for those people who have tapped into it, whether that's going to a university which has an oil and gas related course, or whether it's just simply you were born up here and you're aware of it through that way. I mean, it is challenging at the moment to recruit people. I think there is sort of slightly less people in the market, and there's a lot of companies looking for people as well. So it is if you are thinking about entering the industry, it's probably a great time to do it actually, because of that kind of shortage. And it's I would say it's a job seekers market at the moment rather than a recruiters market, I think.
Great, thanks very much, guys. I think that kind of falls on nicely to a question that we got direct as well, was like looking at what are the job prospects for young professionals, the long-term future of the industry, with young professionals seeing the cancellation of grad schemes, apprenticeship schemes, and an aging workforce. How are we going to pass on these skills required for the future? Because I think most of us would probably agree that you can read things in a book, but if you're actually shadowing and being mentored by individuals, that is key to progressing as an engineer, or if you're in the support functions. It's very good to have that mentorship element. If I can ask Paul, what would be your thoughts on that? I mean, for example, what's Wood doing with regards to grad and apprenticeship schemes?
We're growing them at the minute. We sort of to play on sort of what the panel said so far, is the fact that we're rotating them, we're bringing them in, rotating them round, and making sure that they have the experience across the energy sector. And the graduates are probably an easier sell at the minute for us, I think, than apprentices, because the apprentices are stamped with that traditional offshore oil and gas tag. But again, that you can, as we said earlier, we can lift from the North Sea and literally place anywhere. I mean, we run hydrogen sites, we run sort of downstream processing, we run chemicals, we run pharma. If you can manage and run and maintain an offshore asset, you won't be out of place onshore. Few minor adjustments, but they're just not going to be out of place offshore. The problem we are going to face, and I think everybody on this call here is going to face over the next few years, is we do have a generation gap. We've got this hole that's sitting there, that's sort of the 40s into the 50s. We just aren't there. We've got an aged workforce that has an incredible amount of knowledge stored up here, and we need to ensure that we tap that and give it to that next generation coming through. And that for me is the challenge we've got. How do we do that? By somehow getting more apprentices. But, and this is the big but, we need to manage that. There's the drawdown on operating costs, and sort of as Dan said earlier, a lot of the activity is going to be brought onshore. A lot of it, the sort of artificial intelligence now, sort of scanning, where we had an old reliability maintainability engineer. We've now got sort of main AI that's looking at that and bringing down and sort of predicting and forecasting, reducing the amount of maintenance that's there. We've got predict the monitoring systems are in place. So we can sort of, we don't need to run to failure anymore, so therefore we can plan more easily, and therefore those, although we still need those traditional apprenticeships, there's a whole wider scope that we can grab into. But bottom line, we need to tap into that older generation that are at that point of retirement.
Great, thank you. What are you finding, Alec, on your side? Do you much in the apprenticeships and grad schemes with Serica or anything like that, or is that in the pipeline for the future?
Yeah, I mean, we've in recent years we've hired a few graduates, and we've hired on some, more recent, staff positions. We also do the summer intern scheme as well, where we'll have usually taken a couple of summer interns and put them into certain departments. We also run the APITO, or subscribe to the APITO apprenticeship scheme, which I think that's a real successful scheme where young people are obviously getting offshore and getting the experience from, as we say, perhaps the aging workforce and getting the experience gap plugged. But I think there's no silver bullet. As Paul says, there's a gap, and as companies we're going to have to roll up our sleeves to try and get people up the learning curve perhaps quicker. As we said, there's not as many projects and activities what there was 20, 30 years ago. So what does that mean? I don't think it means just putting people on a bunch of training courses. I subscribe to the kind of philosophy that you put people on a training course when they need it, use it or lose it. You need to give them the blend of real project experience, real tasks with deliverables, where you maybe let them take a few gulps of water, but you won't let them sink. But they need to get that experience, so they can then become standalone, and then they can become the hopper of experience and knowledge for the next intake of people. So it's going to be tough, but we've been through tough times before and come through it. But I think we are seeing more schemes. I take your point, Ross, that there has been some cancellation of schemes, during pandemic and things like that. But I think since then, I think that there is encouragement that, especially oil and gas operators, you're starting to see them do more graduate schemes, more modern apprenticeships. And I think that modern apprenticeship is a winner, because there you can get people leaving school, getting into employment whilst doing their degree education. So yeah, I think it's positive.
Great. I'll just go to one of the live questions now, and this is a good one. I'll have to pick on yourself, Paul and Dan, with this one. How prepared are the EPC companies to adopt and implement new technologies such as green hydrogen and carbon capture for the purpose of decarbonisation? Who wants to go with that one first?
Well, we do have a director hydrogen on the call.
Yeah, and I actually know who actually asked the question too. Yeah. So, how are we prepared? And I'm going to challenge the operators on the call on this. Better than what the operators are, to be honest. And I think it's predominantly because if you're in the oil and gas market, oil and gas is very much about having a license, shooting seismic, knowing your well, going in, going into appraisal, drilling, all this sort of stuff, and Alex will keep me right on my terminology. As you get into the world of hydrogen and carbon capture, it's not about that. It's about technology, and it's about how you bring innovation to the market. And I think if I look at as Paul alluded to there, I'm now a director of hydrogen for Worley. We're getting that sort of work, likes of what the Woods and all and the Flowers are as well, because we've got the expertise within the business, and companies come to us because of the brains that we've got working for us, not because we own a commodity that's called hydrogen. And I think that's how we as EPC companies are getting ourselves ready for the decarbonisation. It's how we build, and this is going to go completely off topic. It's not about an industry in the oil and gas market. It's about how you then build that, the future SMEs, the future PhD students, these sort of things that come up with how do you get from being a 5 megawatt module for hydrogen to a 10 megawatt to a 50 megawatt, these sort of things. And that's where you're seeing us as a service sector, EPC companies investing a lot of money and a lot of effort. And we're doing that with graduates. And one of the feedstocks we're taking from, and it's a prime example as to why I've gone into my new role, is we take it from the oil and gas industry. Mm-hmm. And it's a direct competition to what the North Sea needs. And I think that's where we've got to find the balance, is that, the hydrogen market that I'm now in, that's a 40-year journey, and it's literally just started. And I look at, as I spend all the time in The Hague at the moment, because our Centre of Excellence for Hydrogen is The Hague, because The Hague is attached to Delft University, where a lot of the really smart individuals come out of. And I think that's how we're preparing for it, because as I talked about that downward trend of hydrocarbons as you go towards 2050, the other things that are on top of those graphs within the UK are the decarbonisation markets of CCUS, hydrogen, renewables, and so forth. So, so we're investing heavily in the world of what is a decarbonised industries, Ross, is how we're doing it. Over to you, Paul.
Cheers, Dan.
That was a good mic drop there, Dan.
I'm just going to put a sales pitch in for Wood here. We've been involved in, I think, it should be down here, Dan, if I'm wrong. I think we've been involved in something like 50%, over 50% of the world's carbon capture projects to date. We're sort of heavily involved, and we sort of got three elements to it. We've got three pillars, we've got three elements to our business. We've got projects, consultancy and operations, and within operations. And all three are joined together by this decarbonisation common element. We all focused on that. We've got a number of hydrogen projects ongoing within operations. Consultancy are deeply involved in sort of the longer term thought processes up to government level. And as I say, we're sort of 50% of the world's carbon capture. So how prepared are we? We're pretty prepared. And to reiterate what Dan said, it's all coming from that dirty oil and gas.
Yeah, because I think that kind of moves on quite nicely to the next question. I think that what we found, a lot of the questions that are coming through are very much related to this one. From a PR perspective, how does the industry improve or educate young professionals on its advancements? Obviously we've seen on the TV, we've got the Just Stop Oil campaigns, we've seen a number of demonstrations, etc. So is the industry guilty of not showcasing its advancements that it's made from even 5-10 years ago? And how do we get that message across to young professionals? But I can maybe ask yourself, Chris, how do you think we can do that as an industry?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the OE UK piece, and I was at an event recently where their new CEO came along and presented a really good slide back, some really, really interesting figures that I'd never heard before, and a lot of the OEMs in the room hadn't heard either. And that is a little bit worrying in that if we don't know about it, obviously nobody else does either. And so I think that's where we really need to do the kind of sales pitch for, yes, it's not ideal that we're kind of drawing on fossil resources that we know are not renewable, but we do need them, and this is how we're getting them in the most sort of environmentally responsible and kind of fiscally responsible way. And I think the really scary bit is if you start to bring in oil and gas from external to the UK, your emissions are effectively 3 or 4 times as much, and it costs 3 or 4 times as much as well. So there are some pretty scary numbers around that. So 117 billion pounds of hydrocarbons imported to the UK in 2022. Now imagine if we could up our own domestic production and at least eat away into some of that. You could put all that money to much better use, kind of addressing some of the issues that affect absolutely everybody. So that was really eye-opening. And I think we need more people having those conversations, getting into schools. It was mentioned at the time that some teachers have a very negative view on oil and gas industry and pass that on. And you can't, if you start to sow seeds like that at a very early age, it's very difficult to undo that damage. So it really needs to be, people advocating for the oil and gas industry. And the sort of call to arms was that anyone that works there can be a voice for good for it. In events like this, in events, even in just sort of your day-to-day interaction with your friends, you can kind of make the case for it not being a horrible, dirty industry that's polluting the world and making massive profits, and just be a little bit more positive about it and just try and sort of get the message out there. But yeah, I think David's made a comment on the chat there as well that getting people early is the really key bit, before people start to form their own opinions and get them ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think when I recall my daughter coming back from her school, she's only 9, and was saying, "Oh, Dad, they were telling us that oil and gas industry is dirty, this, that, and the next thing." And I'm thinking, well, this is where we got to try and win the hearts and minds of young people, because they're our future engineers, cost controllers, project. It doesn't matter which topic. This is our future. We need to encourage and maybe market ourselves better, or maybe engage with at a very, very early stage. I mean, Ellie, what's your viewpoint on that? Do you think that as an industry we need to be, I don't know, a bit more engaging with younger people from a very early age, or where do you think the issue lies?
I mean, yeah, 100%, and I kind of agree with everything that's been said. And I think as well as just educating people and engaging them, I think the key is kind of developing really simple language, which would explain what could be complex issues, and then people like yourself are also organizing events like this, and then people like us showing up and talking to people like out there in the audience. So that's what we should be doing, I think.
That falls on to a really good question that we've had here live as well. I mean, what would be the suggestion if young professionals in the market could potentially create awareness sessions to attract young professionals to the energy sector, not particularly from specific engineering disciplines, but across disciplines? And I just want to make sure I've got the rest of that because I can see it on the screen. Do you think it would be a good approach? What do you think about that one, Andy? Do you think that would be an approach to maybe start winning back the hearts and minds of young people?
I do, yeah. I think, and just building on some of the comments which from the previous question, I think there's the root of the problem, or the root of the challenge is we hear in public domain, politicians, newsreaders, they like to tell, or they like to communicate the societal costs of the oil and gas industry. What's clear to me is there's an absolute mismatch between people living their lives and their awareness of what the benefit of the industry gives to them. Even if it's from the moment you wake up, that is enabled by the oil and gas industry, having an oil and gas industry within the UK. If you take a picture of the globe at night, where the lights burn brightest will be where hydrocarbon consumption is highest. So on one side of that equation is the carbon footprint of the individuals will be highest. On the other side, though, you will have, not always, but most likely, lowest levels of child mortality, longest lifespans, highest level of education in females, highest levels of diversity, highest levels of equality. And that is driven to some extent by having a supply of oil and gas. And that is the piece that's missing. That's the bit that's not reported equally. So it needs to be balanced. I guess the other bit as well is we talk a lot about, or it's greenwashing. That's the expression we often hear. It's greenwashing. It's greenwashing. All operators, service companies will all have our roadmaps now to net zero, and we're all working along them. So what we need to do as an industry is we need to, we've developed our roadmaps. We need to continue to work those and be able to demonstrate that we're moving along with it, and then that's when we start bringing the sort of the public or the young professionals along with us. I think there's a piece of getting our houses in order. I think our houses are in order, by the way, but it's being able to demonstrate to ourselves, and then we can demonstrate to other people. I think we're always going to be faced with this challenge of just stop oil. I'm at a point where it actually doesn't matter. They can ask their question. It doesn't really matter what our answer is anymore, because they've already got their opinions and they're actually not going to change. But so it's more about kind of living to our own values and enacting the promises we've made to ourselves in terms of our net zero and our pathways to net zero, and supporting the energy transition.
Great, thank you. Alec, I mean, what do you think from your discipline? Do you think creating awareness sessions to kind of showcase how things work for young professionals would create more of a drive and an interest in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a bit of a change, since the unfortunate events in Ukraine, and I guess the focus on energy security. I think that has increased the awareness levels of how important oil and gas is, and I think if you speak to some operators in Aberdeen, they've seen a step change in the application rates for jobs, kind of almost in the back of that. So I think we've all got to do our bit. OEUK, it's been mentioned a few times. They're good at giving us the stats and highlighting the reliance on imported energy and how we need to get away from that. But we all need to do our little bit. We need to be targeting the primary schools. We need to be targeting the secondary schools, the career fairs, the universities. If we all do our little bit, all these marginal gains will add up to something greater. So we'll never be done. It needs to be kind of relentless, and again, there's just no silver bullet. It's we all need to play a part.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Alec. I think one of the questions here, because says hydrocarbons are a finite resource. What are the prospects for a career in decommissioning our current infrastructure? Now, I think I'll probably just ask this to yourself, Andy, first and foremost, from obviously your previous role. I mean, what do you see as the main requirements within decommissioning for the North Sea assets that would be needing, and what sort of skills would we be needing from young professionals?
I think they're very similar to the skills that the industry has required all along. So there's So I'll start at the beginning. So decommissioning projects are slightly different because there's no pot of gold at the end of it like there is with if you're developing a platform or you're drilling a well. So the requirement for innovation, doing things better, doing things simpler, doing things more fluidly, more efficiently, it sort of magnified even more for decommissioning. So, that comes in this form of project managers, decommissioning engineers, supply chain managers, health and safety as well, environment. There's, some of the challenges around that are similar to an operational installation, but some of the challenges are quite different as well in keeping people safe and minimizing the impact on the environment. So absolutely there's a career, and there's a number of, or quite a lot of, oil and gas installations in the UKCS which will require decommissioning and will require removal. And it's not just that element, it's the P&A, plug and abandonment of the wells as well. Then there's also obviously the onshore, the recycling of these massive pieces of equipment. We may be one of the first regions to enter decommissioning. Now, if you begin a career in decommissioning in the UK, you're going to have a level of expertise which can be applied to other parts of the world. So it goes right back to the point I made at the beginning that, it's that the UK could be a really, really good springboard. If you wanted to, decommissioning shouldn't be seen as an end of career, activity. It could be a fantastic beginning to a very long, interesting and lucrative career, I think, for anyone starting out in the industry.
Great, thanks very much. I think we're almost coming to the end, believe it or not, of our session tonight. I knew it would go quite quickly, but I think this is a great question. It's just came in as well from Emily here, which I'll ask you all. If you were to give your younger self a piece of career advice, what would it be? So I'll start with yourself, Paul. What would your best piece of career advice you give your younger self?
Well, first one, don't change a thing. But I think best advice I was ever given was, and I'll fess up, I'm ex-military. So as a young soldier, I was told, volunteer for everything. It's the easiest way to get out the guard room, and it's the best advice I had. Volunteer, get out, experience, and do everything, and just get out that comfort zone. If you stay in your comfort zone, don't expect a promotion. Don't expect that self-actualization or enjoyment, because you just stagnate. Volunteer for everything and get out there and do it.
Great. Chris, what about yourself?
So I had some really good advice from my mentor when I was a fresh graduate, and that was to make sure that you're getting everything you can from every little bit of experience that you're getting. So even the fairly mundane tasks, make a point of understanding exactly why and what the details behind it. Do the reading, make some notes on it, and just use that to develop. And that really helped me, and I tried to stick by that as I kind of carry on through my career as well.
And Don?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same place as Paul. I've had a pretty amazing career so far, and I think it would be to take every opportunity. Just grab it with both hands, give it your all, and have fun. No point doing this if you're not having fun.
That's it, exactly. Alec, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting just as diverse a range of experience early in your career as possible. Don't be scared to change tact. Back to Paul's point, volunteer for the jobs that everyone else avoids. Stand out from the crowd, and yeah, don't sweat too much when mistakes are made. Mistakes is what gives you the experience. Nobody learns anything when the job goes right. It's the mistakes, it's the learnings. You always hope that jobs go safely, but it's the jobs that don't go so well that we learn from, and that's what really makes us. So, I think early on in your career you can sweat too much when mistakes happen, but yeah.
That's a great point. Thank you. Ellie, what about you?
I think the kind of key learning for me personally was, and I wish I realized it, I suppose, earlier, was that we don't kind of have to be tied into a specific like industry or discipline or role. There are no rules that say, well, you have to have kind of the same career path for whatever 20 years, and as varied experience as possible. And I would really like you to have that. So I guess the advice is just to go for it with an open mind and then have courage to change direction if it feels right at that particular moment.
Excellent. And Andy, what about yourself?
I'd say, so don't change the core of who you are, because when things get tough, that's all you will have. So it's really important to keep that. I would say take the leap of faith as well. I think looking back on there's been moments where there has been opportunities and I've kind of judged for myself whether I could do it or not. Sometimes back yourself and let others make that decision, because you never know where you might go. It'll often, you can do more than you think, I think, a lot of the time. And then the other one is make sure you learn how to cook. You can have good days, you can have bad days. A good way of changing a bad day into a good day is making yourself a nice meal. So at the end of the day, so that's an important thing for me.
That's a brilliant way to end it as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's us at 8 o'clock. I knew, as I said earlier, I knew it was going to go quite quickly, and it flew past. And I just want to obviously say a huge thanks to our panelists for being the guinea pigs in the first ever AYP live event on our social channels. So thanks very much to Paul Binney, Chris Taylor, Dan McAteer, Alec Perry, Ellie Zamani, and Andy Wright for your time tonight. Thanks very much. So what I want to do is just to kind of to really close up tonight. I could put the guys away. I'll let them now have a break in the green room. They can grab a cup of tea, maybe something stronger. Who knows? But I just wanted to kind of really close up tonight, and thank you for everyone that came along to listen to us, and obviously those that provided some of the questions tonight too. So in advance of this debate, I did some research and found that for the UK to reach its climate goals by 2050, the Office of Budget Responsibility forecasts the delivery of net zero will need investment of around £1.4 trillion. So with £1 trillion of that coming from private sector investment, so it's quite big numbers. But how are we going to attract this level of investment? That's a question we need to ask. We're going to have to create certainty and stability in the UK that's going to attract this level of investment. And I think the continuous dabbling that we've seen with the taxation of the industry is creating a lot of uncertainty and making the UKCS a less viable place to invest. Our domestic oil and gas sector does have a pivotal role to play as we make the energy transition. For example, wind turbines, which I think most of us would agree most of the public relate to as one of the main forms of renewable energy generation, are made in part from oil-based products. There isn't really a simple choice between oil and gas on the one hand and renewables on the other. So in 2022, over 75% of the UK's total energy requirements were derived from oil and gas. So that's quite a significant figure still. And 24 million homes rely on gas boilers, including my own, for heat and hot water. And 32 million UK vehicles rely on petrol or diesel for fuel. So last year alone, I know that Chris touched on this, we imported £117 billion worth of energy. So the reality is we will need to have a sensible transition, and both oil and gas and renewables are needed to secure our energy security and grow our economy. We need to have honest discussions and debates like we had tonight. And as Energy Bill progresses through the House of Commons, political parties must put politics aside and realise that we need to encourage young professionals and interest in the sector, challenge the norms, advanced technologies, and also secure our energy needs for the future, because it's only going to go one way. We need to win the hearts and minds of our workforce of the future to ensure a swift and sensible energy transition. Thanks again for watching tonight, and I look forward to welcoming you to future AYP discussion series events. Good evening.